So anyway, yeah, welcome. And sorry for the technical issues. I guess what I wanted to say was, we get to celebrate once a year, this day that we're born. And oftentimes what I found with holidays in general is that we tend to have, maybe as we get older, less so, but we tend to have expectations around, how we're going to be honored or celebrated. And oftentimes there's anxiety around this, or there is um, welcome, Cece. And whoever else was here first that I can't see your name, but welcome to my other viewer. And talking about, because today's my birthday, this idea of expectation around holidays and expectation around birthdays or any real holiday. And I think that what used to happen for me, and I see it happening with my kids because I have four of them, is that we will often um, the expectation we have around holidays is often connected to the expectation we have around, um, self-worth and around, like, this idea that I think society tends to permeate and sort of pressurize us in these pressure chambers that I like to talk about, of like the fact that, this is a special day. So because it's a special day, we have these expectations. And we know, just like Buddhist principle talks about, anytime you have expectation for something, you also have the opportunity to be disappointed. And yet we're humans. And so of course we want to have we have expectations that build up. Now, me, this is my 48th birthday, and I'm at a place where I'm pretty clear, like, okay, it's just another birthday. Oh, hi, we have some new people. Oh, Jason, maybe that was you that was on from the beginning. Hi, Jason. And we have Jane and Shaw and then Cece here. Oh, thanks, Cece. Yeah, it's my birthday. And I always love being able to say Earth Day is my birthday because I feel really connected to Mother Earth and to this stream of, I believe that well, I was just talking about expectations, but I'll come back to that. But I do believe that the earth is a living being. And just as, science is getting to the point with quantum physics where they're able to show that on the tiniest level, there it is just energy that really, even when they break down, and I'm not a scientist, but when they break down thank you, getting some birthday wishes, that even though things that seem completely concrete, like me sitting here talking to you and us in these bodies and sitting where we are sitting, it all seems very solid. But really, at the end of the day, it is at the tiniest level, it's energy moving really, really quickly when you break it down. And so if you think about that, it's hard because our senses to train us to feel like everything's really solid, but really it is all energy. And I think the more we can begin to realize that the experience we're having, though seemingly very materialistic, is actually part of a much larger experience of energy and frequency that is really all there is on the smallest level and on the biggest macro, like as above, so below. And so I feel like the more we can get behind that and the more that we can begin to allow ourselves to realize that if everything is energy and thought forms are also, like, when our neurons are firing and our emotions create an experience, and there's a loop that happens, a feedback loop between the body and this, everything's interconnected. So the somatic experience of what a thought will create an emotion, and a remote emotion will release hormones, or maybe it's the other way around. But either way, your body gets flooded with hormones, and this experience creates a very visceral experience. Like, it's hard not to be in a place where your whole body is sort of taken over by emotions created by thoughts. And my point to all of this is that we can easily become derailed in this material plane where we feel like everything around us, religion and society, wants us to believe that this is what it is, and that your body is it, and that's your identity, and that the physical resources you have are everything. And yes, we all do need resources to survive, but what I've found, having navigated a whole ton of trauma and on this healing journey is that the more, and it's not that I spiritually bypass and go up and out, but the more that I can anchor into the fact that yes, it's a material experience. Yes, we're on a solid, seemingly solid, because it actually is all energy, but yes, we're part of this solid plane of existence. Yes, I have a physical body that has physical needs. And so it's a little bit of this dance that I feel like exists between not jumping up and out of the body, because the body's here, and this experience, though painful and though mundane or boring or awful or sad or what tragic or happy, like it's all part of this experience that's constantly changing. But if we anchor too much in thinking that's all there is, that will create an underlying feeling of anxiety. Whereas if we can remember that we are, in essence, consciousness that can never be destroyed. Like there's the whole law of physics, like energy can never be created or destroyed. Like it exists. And so you as a conscious being, and me as hi, we have two other joiners. Um Dipti, Dipti and Susan. Hopefully I'm not butchering any names. Welcome. But as we begin to anchor into this experience that we are a conscious being that has traveled beyond and exists beyond this life form that you are in, and beyond what seems very solid, very finite, very, and all of the doctrine that would have you believe this is it. And because the body is wired as a biological creature that needs to survive, so there is all this wiring that goes into being in this survival mindset. But when you can, through contemplative practice and reading and in your own sort of looking within, let's just call it witnessing of your experience, and a lot of the teachings talk about becoming a witness, and it's not so easy as they make it seem. It's not that you can witness when you're like, if your hands, let's say your hand gets put in a fire, like you're not going to be like, "Oh, here I am with my hand burning." Like pain is intense, and like, going back to what I was saying before, strong emotions, your body gets flooded. Trauma works that way. Like it is really hard to maintain the idea of the witness, maintain the memory of, "Oh, I'm a spirit on a human journey. There is more than this material plane." And linking back to what I started talking about when I started talking about the live, holidays in general and expectation, whether it's about a holiday, a birthday, or an experience, anytime we build up expectation around a hope, usually it's a hope that something will go a certain way. And that hope, I just want to honor. Usually, it's the little child in us that came out very pure and innocent and wanting to have an experience, or just excited to be alive and wanting to connect and wanting to explore and express, and like those early birthdays even, or those early holidays, and at some point experiences began to happen, either super intense traumatic experiences or even just subtle experiences of, you don't get to have that, or this isn't going to be what you had hoped, and that feeling of disappointment, and that feeling of being shut down and sort of slammed shut your expression, and that little child that just wanted to share, just wanted to connect, maybe was having a moment like a tantrum. Maybe it's a tantrum that you had when you were a little, but that feeling over and over because of your parents who were also trained that they couldn't be their full expressive selves, or your teachers, or all the adults around you as you were a little being in this hurting world, you get over and over and over reinforced. You're not allowed to have that. You're not good enough to be that. You can't, and it's not that they mean to, because you sometimes you even have well-meaning parents who are wanting to support you, but they also have their backlog of limiting beliefs that create a certain set of behaviors that they either tell you, or maybe they say one thing but they're inconsistent. Like they're like, "Oh, Johnny, yes, I'm going to elevate you. I'm going to tell you you're good," if they're good parents, which some of us do have parents, and even the ones that are awful have masking and have times where they're saying the right thing. But then underneath it, they have their own script running, which is also a self-belief of, well, I wasn't able to have it. And that's how the generational trauma repeats. So I think what happens is, as young children, we want to just, like, let's say on a holiday, like, explore the feeling of like, wow, this is a special day. And that feeling of special, we're all that's part of our intrinsic nature, to feel joy, to feel contentment, to feel excitement, to feel a sense of wonder. Sorry, bumping into my mic. And when we have this sense of wonder that gets shut down, and an inner expression that gets told, you don't get to be that, you don't get to have that. And I'm using holidays as an example because it's my birthday, but I think that this can exist around any experience, like the hopefulness of, you know, wanting to get a job, wanting to get into the right school that you were hoping for, even at the beginning of a relationship, hoping that it will that you'll be able to have the experience that that little child in you wanted. And then right away, because of all the programming, there is this other whiplash of that attachment feeling of, when you're hoping for something and it doesn't happen, there's this little girl or little boy inside who this it's like confirmation of, "Oh, see, I knew that was gonna happen. I knew I wasn't good enough, and or I knew that I wasn't gonna be able to have what my dreams told me I was gonna have." And so then it reinforces this feeling of, "Oh, I'm never gonna get it," or I can't." Like those feelings that I know all of us can relate to of, "I'm not good enough. I just can't. It won't." Like all the negative self-beliefs that keep us very trapped and very contained. And so I feel like birthdays can be this mixed bag that I happen to be talking from one where I was like, or people are like, "Are you excited for your birthday?" And I was like, "I'm not even thinking about it." Like, I went and helped my son with his play, and I didn't even tell anyone it was my birthday. And then my sister-in-law called, and we were like, "Yeah, by the time you get to the age we're at, or I'm at, you're really just like happy to have another day. You're a little bit like, oh, another year older." And then, maybe you carve out a moment for yourself and you're happy to receive some birthday texts or messages, but it's not like you need to make a big deal out of it. But growing up, before, there was this feeling on this day or other holidays or at any time where there might be a little bit of expectation. And then it's always coupled with this sort of this feeling of something happens that makes it not what you were hoping, or that reinforces this idea of, I guess I wasn't good enough to have it. And birthdays and holidays just being an example of that. But I feel like anytime our heart begins to have some desire of like, oh, maybe that could be for me, we inevitably have like another voice in us that comes in and is like, yeah, but you can't. Yeah, but who do you think you are, like, to want that, to deserve that? That idea of not being deserving, that idea of not being worthy, ultimately it comes down to feeling like we're not worthy of love. And getting to my other point, when we internalize these beliefs, even from, and I've written about this, let's call it the parents who are well-intentioned, who are actually loving you and trying, like I said, they have all their limiting self-beliefs that have created the person they became, which you inherit because that's how it works. And as you then grow up yourself, ideally, you begin to shed the limiting beliefs that weren't yours. I talk a lot about the being cracked open, and that's what happens. So it's like you're born into this body. You're really a spirit having a human experience, but you're born into this body and world that tells you this is it, in a biological body that fights for survival and that has all these biological needs that make you uncomfortable, that, vulnerability doesn't feel good because the survival brain thinks of vulnerability as something to be avoided because that means that you might get hurt. And so the body's fighting to protect you, and you're being told all around you that you don't, on some subconscious level, you're forming these ideas. I must not be good enough. I can't, I won't, it can't. And so to me, really adulting or growing up, which I was just talking to a parent at school about this. Oh, thank you. That just happened. How did that happen? That was cool. That was like a happy birthday. Um, but growing up, you basically, yeah, you ideally, if you become an adult who's responsible, who can then end these cycles of what you were told as a child and become someone, like I like to talk about, a healed person helping heal others versus just hurt people. And I think most of us can probably relate to how many hurting people we've had in our lives. And yet, to become someone, and not to say you're never going to hurt someone accidentally, but to really step into a place of being a healed person who is able to help heal, it involves excavating these limiting self beliefs and bumping up against whether it's a holiday or a new relationship or a experience where you allow yourself to really desire and reach for that thing, and then also being able to hold the vulnerability of what that means and be conscious and witnessing the voices that sweep in to either sabotage it. Like I've been really hi, welcome, Damien. I've been really bumping up against recently, like I call it my inner saboteur. And it's really the part of me that sabotages things that are good because the little kid in me was trying to protect me from things that were way too big. And so we often have outdated operating systems, outdated little beings inside us trying to protect us, these thought forms that are part of this inner child that's operating the show. And so part of this like growing up and adulting, which the getting back to my point from before, I was talking to a mom at my kid's school because I told you I was helping my son with his play, and they actually just immigrated from Israel. There are 2 families at the school who are at a Waldorf school in Israel, but because of, the intensity of the war, and obviously we all know, like, right now, what's interesting about that whole dynamic is that, like, why the Jewish people were persecuted and have been, but now with who they have in charge, again, just like all these crazy men in charge that are just like convinced they need to kill other people in order to have more power. And my whole thing of absolute power corrupts absolutely. And not to make this political, but there is this needless killing that is happening. Any of us can see it all the time. And who's benefiting from it? Only the richest of the rich who are padding their pockets. And so, though, it affects both sides. So even though right now, like in Gaza, there's this genocide happening, but it's affecting both sides of, like, it's hard to live in Israel right now. So we have 2 families at my son's school. And I was talking to one of the moms about moving and how putting yourself in a new environment can be uncomfortable. And then we were also talking about, it came up like adulting, and how I was like, because she has a teenage daughter and I do too. And I was talking about how I've coached my daughters to not worry about when friendships don't work out or when friends sort of end up making it all about them. And I was like, even in my adult friendships, I've had to walk away from family members, as those of you who follow me know, family members and friends. And really it wasn't until I learned to say no more and to walk away that I really began to f- to really start this healing journey that I'm talking about, where I was able to start to excavate these negative self-beliefs of I'm not worthy, I must be bad, the shame cycle stuff of the little girl that wanted to be expressive, the little girl that wanted to love and connect and just receive love and give love, that was slammed down over and over, where and we all have this, where it becomes not safe to be us. So we mask and we perform. And then in order to heal from that cycle, you have to at some point create safety with boundaries, create enough of an inner witness that can see, "Oh, look at how," and again, just because of the birthday theme, going back to like, "Oh, look at how I was on this expectation for this holiday or this new encounter or new relationship or new friendship. Look at how I came at it with good intentions, but also with a whole bunch of wounding that was running the show." And I was just reading a Substack article on it, the MUD, and I forget what MUD stands for, but it was like, subconscious. Oh, I'm gonna look it up for next time. But anyway, like we basically have these subconscious belief systems that are pretty much running our show. And so all these adults who are running the world and otherwise on the macro and like micro level, like in your immediate environment and on the political stage, so many adults that never did do this process of creating space by having healthy boundaries, by really looking excavating within of like, who is this wounded child in me running the script, holding the script, running around, throwing tantrums and running wild? Like, who is that? What are they wounded by? And really taking the time to sit with him or her and be like, I'm so sorry you never had a parent to love you the way you need to be loved. I'm going to love you now. And you begin, because I wrote a note on this the other day, the trauma affects the brain. Trauma changes the brain, but so does healing. And so I think that what happens is, this is such a dark planet. I mean, it's a beautiful planet, but human beings have been in cycles of darkness for now, eons, it feels like, of war and pillage and slavery and really like the mightiest rule, the hindbrain that I talk a lot about, of the survival of the fittest, and really like the strongest wins out. Whereas like these qualities of empathy and these qualities of compassion and these spiritual qualities that are really our true essence before we came into this planet, which has been going through a long dark night of the soul. And I talked about that in my last live too. Um, but now we're at this time sorry, we can actually begin to do the work. And many of us here are, and that's my mission. That's why I do these lives. And it's to sort of unpack all of the things that I've learned along the way, and to create a forum, either writing or talking with you guys about what the healing journey was like for you guys too. And to really to shed light on how hard it is, because I feel like this takes me to another point. Even in the healing spheres, and this article I was reading recently on Substack, he was talking about, people that do a lot of the work and are in the environments where they are teaching about healing or spirituality or somatic, going into the body to heal it, or meditation retreats, or whatever it is you're using to try to heal. Even those people leading the workshops have not been able to really get to the layer underneath. And so performative healing is what I call it. And I think that that's the risk that happens in any environment, but especially in the healing environment, it can be even more destructive because, again, going back to what I was saying, if that little child that formed all these limiting beliefs based on the parent's subconscious limiting beliefs and based on these sort of inner wounds of I must not be good enough, and then the saboteur that tries to protect you but is really just like wreaking havoc, like if you have like a 2-year-old in charge of the army, sort of like what we have now, the emotional maturity of a 2-year-old controlling weapons, like that's not what you want, but that's what we have. That's exactly what we have. And so that's because these leaders and most human beings, to be honest, like let's be honest, most human beings haven't been able to get to that inner child to really figure out what is creating this child that can't be consoled, that's either too sad or too angry, or a combination of the two, or too anxious. So this like anxious, upset, like this frenetic, like almost like a fever. I remember reading something of, they were talking about the fever of the soul. We are in a time where the assault on human consciousness and humanity, there is a feverish pitch to what our emotional life exists. Like if you don't learn how to unplug, how to step away, how to go start to excavate into these places, welcome Billy, that are internal, and it takes courage, and Kyle, welcome. There it takes courage to be able to um basically get to the painful places, because the thing is, you didn't get to the place you are, however old you are. For me, 48 today. Like I didn't get to this place at 48 without having survived, and welcome Nicole, let's just call it a shit ton of trauma. And everyone alive today has had it in microdoses all the way along, or microdoses plus huge sort of catastrophic moments that were where their autonomy was taken, their boundaries were taken, or it could have been more of a mental thing where you were told you weren't good enough. And so we're all operating with like giant backpacks full of rocks, full of negative self-beliefs. And so it takes courage to stop, to sort of like, it takes an adult in the room. And who's going to be the adult? Like, how do we adult up? Who's going to be the adult to be like, oh, instead of pointing a finger, because like it's easy as a little kid to be like, like just look at our political stage or look at most humans. And have a song and I like to quote, "War is an inside job as well." Like, the reason we have war on the global stage is because we, in our own psyches, in our own relationships, in our intimate lives with ourselves, we have not learned yet how to stop being at war in our own beings. And until we learn how to put down our weapons and our armor, which was there also to protect you, until you learn to let that part of you die, because death and rebirth is what it's all about. You see it happening in the seasons, you see it happening. It is part of the universal flow of destruction and recreation, death and rebirth. The only constant is change. And being in a biological body, you fear that because the body is wired to survive and destruction means the end of your body. So it's this really interesting dance of all of the parts of our psyche that are trying to keep you alive. The hindbrain I talk a lot about, the survival brain, it's good. It's not that it's not good, but we have a whole part up here. We have a whole center part. And that was another Substack I was reading by Vera Hart. I love her stuff about how they're beginning to show that narcissistic tendencies are a combination of biology and environment. And I would say that I've seen this to be true for sure in the people that I know. And really, it's this predisposition, genetic predisposition that is also encouraged by the environment. And I feel like those of us that are drawn, like if you're watching this video that I'm doing or you're on Substack putting her out there, I'm going to assume that you were one of those humans that had well, and this is really fun. I love to unpack this. So you can look at it from the psychological, biological perspective that you were one of the humans like me. I just put us all because I call you guys soul family. We came with enough. My daughters, like my kids are like this too, but I see a lot of people that aren't. And then again, they became part of that cycle of a hurter, like you're hurt and then you continue the cycles of hurt versus being a cycle breaker. And a cycle breaker means you had enough biological genetic predisposition. It doesn't mean you had it in your environment, but that the environment that was toxic, that began to be abusive for you, instead of it um obliterating your sense of self or creating such a masking, like look at the president of the United States, that it's just this huge giant bully persona. Like if you had a person, if you had enough inside you biologically predisposed, or I like to think of it as soul wisdom, like if you came in with happy birthday, confetti, with enough soul capacity to withstand the destruction that happened in your environment, and that it made you, instead of becoming more dissociated and more narcissistic, you became more sensitive, you became more hypervigilant, you became more overgiving, self-erasure. Those are all things that are bad. They're destructive for you ultimately, and you need to learn how to heal that inner child. But it also kept you in contact with your humanity, with your heart, with your empathy. And so now the job is for us that didn't lose that piece. The job is for us to begin to be a witness and begin, now that it's safe, or if you're not safe, create safety by walking away. It doesn't matter if they're family or not. Like I think it was on Oprah, there was more and more people are stepping away from their families of origin because people are realizing, like, I don't care who you are to me. If this is toxic, I can't become the adult I am meant to be or the human I'm meant to be. I like to use adult because I'm like, I feel like most humans are little kids running around in an adult body, not like a young, innocent child, but like a very wounded child wearing a bunch of masks versus an adult who's like, hey, I'm working with this inner wounded being of me and I'm taking my frontal lobes and my wise brain and I am parenting this wounded child so that the two of us can move forward in a way that is whole, in a way that has compassion, wonder, joy, all the things you wanted as a little being, but you're not stuck in a little being having the same tantrums. You're able to use the wise parent that is, I'm going to step into a place of sovereignty. I'm going to step into a place of leadership, whether it's small leadership on your Substack platform or in your community with five other people, maybe your friends and your family members, but you become a leader in yourself. You anchor into what is true. You anchor into the part of you that is spiritual beyond this body, beyond this life. And and you begin the hard work of dealing with those wounds and those triggers, and it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong process, but you become committed to that work. And in becoming committed to that work, you begin to be the healed person helping heal others because you're committed to a path of authenticity and of sitting in the crazy, dark, painful emotions of, "Oh, I thought I was a piece of shit because I was made to believe I was, but I'm gonna look at her and I'm gonna tell her, no, she's not. And I'm gonna, in all these little moments, I'm gonna show up for myself. I'm gonna show up for myself." And as you begin to show up for yourself, like today on my birthday, I'm showing up for myself. I was like, should I do my live? I was like, yes. Even if no one shows up, like I do these for me. Like this really feeds me. It fills my cup to be able to talk about the things that have worked for me. And maybe I think so many of us here, if we can be a help to someone else who's also on a healing journey, it's like the joy, like a child. The child draws because it's joyful to draw, but then maybe someone else also appreciates their drawing. It's a reciprocal relationship of expression. That's how it should be. And so once you find your passion and you begin to allow yourself to have your passion and to follow your passion, and it doesn't mean you might have a job, like I have running after my kids, but like if you can do enough self-care and enough carving out that you matter enough to do the things that matter to you, you begin to have this inner flame and this inner spark that was always there but got really pretty buried, that can then be this healed flame or this healing flame that's like, "Hey, here's how I'm doing it. How are you doing it?" And you can really only from your own place of filling your own cup, begin to be a light that shines. Like I talk a lot about the lighthouse. You can begin to be a lighthouse in a dark, stormy sea for others trying to find their way home. And that I think is going to conclude because I am looking at the time and I have to go pick up my kids. Speaking of picking up kids. So that's I came on at 2:30 and that's my live for today. And I really appreciate you guys showing up. I really love you guys. And it's because of you that I get to be here doing this thing that really fills my cup, being on Substack. And I was feeling pretty desperate before joining that I love my kids, but I was like, that's not all I have to offer. It's not all I want to be is a mom. And you guys are the other side of this reciprocity in this relationship that allows me to be my true self. And love you guys. And I haven't done one of these today. This is my love for each one of you. And I'm wishing you the best and lots of love to all of you. Bye.